and there's this building. It's cinder block from ground to ceiling. There is no windows on this building. Sticks a key in this steel door, opens the steel door. He turns around, sticks a key in the lock and locks it from the inside. He said, okay, you guys stay here. I'll be back in a few minutes. 5 minutes later, he comes downstairs and he has this little girl with him. Looked like she was 11, maybe 12 years old. Welcome to the Liberating Humanity podcast. I'm Paul Hutchinson. I'm your host. Today, we're going to be talking about one of my most recent missions, one of the ones right before I retired about a year ago. This was in Ecuador. It started out with a phone call I received from one of my operators that I had done work with in Nicaragua and Honduras and some other places. And he said that he had some connections with the top federal agents in Ecuador who were working on some cases, and they needed some help from us as Americans to get in the door to build the trust with the traffickers and find out where they were keeping the kids. And so we flew down there, and the first thing that happened was there was a girl that was in Peru. She had been trafficked in Ecuador as a child, and then was taken to Peru, and they found her in a hospital. She had been beat up severely by her traffickers because she wasn't being consistent in bringing in $1,000 a day. A child beat up in the hospital because she wasn't bringing in $1,000 a day to her captors. Now, her story is sad. I'm going to tell you where it came from, I'm going to tell you where she came from, how she ended up in this situation, because every one of these children have their own unique story, and unfortunately, many of them come from broken homes. As a child, at 8 years old, her mother died. Her father was a raging alcoholic, and it was a very unfit home for this little 8-year-old. And so she was taken in by her aunt and uncle. By the time she was 10 years old, her uncle was raping her. She told the family what was going on. Nobody believed her. They told her, oh, you're so ungrateful for this new home that you have here, and now you're telling these stories, telling these lies. And so she held it all inside, and she continued to be abused for a couple years. She would go to school, and the signs that should have been picked up by the teachers, by the administrators, by other families of her having no friends, keeping to herself, having low self-esteem, the bruises, these were all telltale signs of a child being abused at home. Nobody noticed except one of the traffickers, an older man who had taken interest in her as a child, had noticed that she was walking alone to school, that she didn't have any friends, and he befriended her and made her feel nice about herself, made her feel like he cared about her, convinced her that she needed to leave her abusive home and come with him to Peru. He bought her a plane ticket, took her from the home, took her to Peru, took her shopping for some really sexy clothes. Still, just as a very young teenager, he then introduces her to a couple other roommates, some other young girls who were working as underaged prostitutes in Peru. And he said to her, he took away her cell phone, took away her passport, and said, here's the deal. You are going to be working on the streets. You don't have to be raped by your uncle, but you do have the responsibility of bringing in $1,000 a day from sleeping with strangers. Now, the average amount of money that she was earning from some of these people on the street was maybe $20, maybe $50. She was sleeping with dozens and dozens of men every single day. But she had nowhere to go. What could she do? She couldn't call home and say, oh, I'm being trafficked right now. And it just so happened that she got beat up. This was the second time when we actually got in touch with her. This was the second time that she had been beat up to the point where she was in the hospital. What's sad is that the first time she was in the hospital, nobody noticed. She was brought in by a strange man that wasn't really her relative. She had bruises all over. It was obvious that she had been raped, but nobody called any authorities. The second time it was severe enough that some nurses paid attention. And so they tried to figure out where she was from originally, found out she was from Ecuador. She wasn't even, a native there in Peru. And then making some other phone calls, we were contacted. And my wife, Vanessa, who works the aftercare for the Child Liberation Foundation, went and visited with her. And in the process, found out that she had been trafficked in Ecuador a little bit before she was taken to Peru. And there was a trafficking ring that still existed in Ecuador that was pulling in young children like herself and bringing them into prostitution and into slavery. And so we flew in, and the federal agents, the very first thing we did, they said, okay, we need your help in following up with a number of the leads that we found from some of the things that she told us, where she was being trafficked from, et cetera. So they took us downtown, and there was myself, a good friend named Petter, a former Green Beret, amazing man, good heart. This was his first operation. And two of my seasoned operators, Jimmy and Jeremy, who had done a lot of work in Latin America in many, many other operations. And so we went in, we had about 5 federal agents that were either tracking us. We gave them the tracking information on our phones, or they were in different places just in case things got difficult, they could come in. Now, this operation, in fact, the last few years of our operations is very different from the earlier ones. The earlier ones, when we were working with the former foundation of the past, we needed to create awareness. And so in order to do so, because we couldn't really have cameras with us in most cases undercover, because that would put our lives at risk, instead we would arrange for a party, something where we would be bringing all of the children from multiple traffickers together so that we could have undercover cameras there, so that we could show you what was happening in these trafficking networks. Well, as time progressed, we realized that for the sake of the children and for the safety of the operators, that was on the edge. And in fact, in some cases, it encouraged traffickers to bring in other victims, et cetera. That's a whole different story. Instead, moving forward, we decided that through the Child Liberation Foundation, we decided that the best thing for us was not to have all the cameras and all of that going on. Instead, we would get in the door and find out exactly where these guys were holding the children. And then we would leave the country, and the federal agents would do their sting without us there on the location that they were holding the kids. They would then put these guys in prison. They would rescue the kids. And that's when we would send in the aftercare to make sure that everything was taken care of with all of the needs for the kids, including their healing. So moving forward, we are in this van, this undercover van with the federal agents, and they take us to this spot downtown. They said, hey, there's a courtyard around the corner here. There's a lot going on here. See what you can find out. So we get out of the van, and we I've got my undercover outfit. It's usually a black shirt with some profane stuff on it and some chains, and looking like a flamboyant American that's down there looking for some little action. And we walk around the corner, and there's this big courtyard, and I'm standing there in the middle. And over the years in doing these undercover missions, especially as I have matured spiritually and gotten to a place where in my life I feel like I'm led every day to a place that would create abundance, that would create healthy relationships, etc. With that spiritual maturation, I had developed the ability to really tune in on these rescue missions, to really tune in. And this got fine-tuned a few years before this, while I was in Haiti and fighting the darkest evil there with some of those traffickers and their voodoo and religious beliefs and things that were going on. And I had to get to this place of light inside in order to even survive in some of those environments. Well, developing that ability to listen, to tune in to that still small voice of truth was something that transformed our ability to find the kids and to keep the operator safe. And so we walk out in the middle of this courtyard, and I'm looking around, and I'm looking, okay, drug dealer, prostitute, and I'm just listening, just listening. And I look down this alley, and there's this prostitute, this girl she's leaning up against a wall with her arms folded and her kind of knee bent and her leg against the wall, and I could feel it immediately. I could feel it, and I grabbed Jeremy. I said, "Bro, come on with me." Of course, rule number one: you're never alone with a trafficker, never alone with any of the victims. So I said, "Jeremy, come with me." Left the other two guys there, and we walked down this alley and walk up to this girl. And I said, "¿Cómo te llamas? What's your name?" And she answers, she says, $10, $10. And I pull out a $20 bill, and she goes, "Oh, those fucky?" I said, "No." I said, in my broken Spanish, I explained to her how we were looking for some things that we couldn't find in the U.S. We had a friend that wanted us to connect him with some girls that were were a little bit younger. Now, in some countries, they don't allow us to say, "Do you know anybody younger?" They have to say fresher. You have to wait till they approach you. In Ecuador, we have flexibility there, and as long as we're not creating trafficking in any way, we can say whatever we want to. And so I can directly ask her, "Do you know of anybody who's selling younger girls?" And so that's what I did. And she goes, "Oh, no, I don't know anybody." And she puts her hands up like this. And I said, "Okay." And I have the $20 bill, and I hold it up, and I says, "You let me know if you know of anybody." And I put it in my pocket, and we went back down to the courtyard area. Less than 2 minutes later, well, I'm standing there with some of the other operators, and she comes down the alley, and she looks at me, and she's waving at me like this. She says, "Come here." So I go over, I grab Jimmy this time. Jimmy's he's bilingual, speaks fluent Spanish. And I said, "Come with me." Her English isn't that good, and my Spanish isn't that good either. So Jimmy comes with me, and she takes us down this alley and down this corner and around the corner again. And we see these two big guys. They're standing out in front of these two, this double French door, big wooden doors, and this old broken down Hostel sign over the top. And she talks to them. They go like this to us, and we come over and we start talking to them. We tell them, "Look, we're down here trying to find some connections for a friend of ours. He wants us to set some things up for him." And she said that you might have what we're looking for. And he said, "Absolutely, I do." And we gave her some money. He then opens up these two big wooden doors. As they open up, there's a little 15-year-old girl right there, and there's some more younger kids that are back in the back. And we said, "Oh yeah, that's what our boss is looking for." We exchanged contact information with these guys, and we made it back down to the courtyard, walked around a little bit more, and then we went back out to the undercover van. And when we sit down with the guys, and I had geotagged that location exactly where it was. Before we were walking out of there, I took a little picture of my map thing on my phone, so my blue dots pointing right where we were, and I showed it to him. And the guy said, "Oh, that's exactly where that little girl from Peru said that she was being sold out of, right there." And he didn't even tell us. He didn't tell us where it was. He literally said there's an 8-block area here that you can kind of walk around. It was less than 5 minutes just listening to my heart and knowing the right person to talk to, that immediately we were taken to the place that she was being trafficked out of. So that told the federal agents that child trafficking was still going on, not only in that area, but specifically in that hostel that she said she was being held at. So they put together a plan where after we were gone, a couple days later, they went in and did a sting. and they found 6 children that were being sold there, that were physically there at the time, and took down 4 traffickers that were pimping those girls and a couple little boys as well in a different location. So those guys went to prison. Those kids got put into aftercare and were identifying their families or whatnot. And so then we get back in this van. He said, okay, we have a couple other leads that we need your help in following up with. And so we drive through the city. It's about half an hour, and we get to this place. He said there's this spa, this hair salon spa that is a legitimate business, but there was a massage place that was back behind it, that was attached to it, that was selling children. And they had a few tips that came in that this massage place was selling kids. And so we start driving and we get into this area of the city, and the federal agent, he goes, "Oh, crap." We said, "What?" He said, "It's closed." He said, "It was supposed to be right here. That's the address right there." And they had completely closed down the spa. He said, our lead came in about a month ago, and it took a while for us to get you guys in here to make this all happen. He said, "Oh, sorry, we lost that lead." And I said, "Stop." He said, "Why stop?" I said, "Stop. I knew that children were being sold there. It was completely obvious to me because I could feel it. I said, "Stop." He stops the car, and our Green Beret jumps out, and he opens the door for the guys in the back, and me and my 2 other operators jump out as well, and we go around the back of the van, and I'm just standing there. I'm looking at this empty storefront that was supposed to have this spa, and I'm just listening to my heart. And I look right, I look left, and I see this restaurant to the left. And I walk into this restaurant, and I go up to the manager of the restaurant, and I said, "Hey, I have a question. There's supposed to be a massage place here, and I can't find it. Do you know where it is?" And he said, "You have an appointment?" Freaking knew it. I knew that place was still open. I said, no, I don't have an appointment. He goes, "Oh, I don't know." He didn't want to have anything to do with it. You could tell this was a nefarious place. There was crap going on here because he didn't want to talk any further about this place because I didn't have an appointment. So walked out in front. There was people walking by everywhere and looking around. And I saw across the street, there was this lady that was walking. She was walking her dog, and I could feel it. I knew she knew something. I walked across the street to her, and I said, "Hey," I pulled out a $20 bill. I said, "Can you help me with something?" I said, I lied a little bit. Sometimes you do undercover. I said, I have an appointment for a special massage here, but I don't see a sign. I don't see an entry. I don't have a phone number on me." And she looked me up and down. I've got a shirt on that has some pretty crude stuff on there. It's actually a picture of a drawing of a doctor, a crazy doctor, and it says, "I'm no gynecologist, but I'll take a look." Right? I've got my hat. My hat says "f***ers" upside down. I've got this big silver chain on. I look like a guy who's down there for the wrong reasons, right? And she looks me up and down, and she picks up her phone, and she dials, and she talks to somebody on the phone, a madam. And just a few minutes later, about 5 minutes later, sure enough, this lady comes and opens up these 2 steel doors, and opens up these, and we walk in through this little back alleyway. And she leads us down this path, and we go up these stairs around the corner. We could tell we were being watched. There was stuff going on there. And she takes us into this lobby area, and there's rooms all around the outside of this lobby. Every one of these rooms have a massage table and a queen size bed in each one of them. And but we didn't see any victims there. She instead pulls open a menu. This menu had pictures of the girls that she had there, and itemized things that they were willing to do, or that she would force them to do at a certain cost. And as we were going through this, our newest operator, our Green Beret, he this was his first time doing deep undercover. And he told me later, he said, "Paul," he said, "I've led over 300 missions in the Middle East." He said, "I have seen death. I have seen the worst that humanity has to offer there. So I thought. He said, I've never seen anything that disturbed me as much as that menu that madam opened up at that time, showing the pictures of these victims, of these little girls, and then having itemized things that you could choose from. And I explained to this madam, I said, oh this is what our boss is looking for. He's just paying us to come down here to kind of find out what's going on where. We're super interested. I told her, how many do you have? Is this all that you have here on the menu? She goes, I have more. She said, but these are my main ones that are here, but I have access to some others that work at another location. And I said, well, we want to make sure that we can provide my boss all of those things. And so I exchanged contact information with her so that we could make sure that we found those other kids as well. And of course, the location was already tagged. We had federal agents that were out in front with a van. And, of course, in situations like this, you want to go in and just boom, do the sting right there. But the kids weren't actually there. We needed to find out where she was holding the kids, if they were in some back room somewhere. Right then, she was just showing us the menu. But we knew for a fact that those kids were being trafficked from that location. And we would have lost them if I hadn't been listening. If I hadn't been listening to that still small voice of truth that told me that kids were still being sold from that location. So we left that location and they took us to this kind of outskirts area. It was a park in the middle and there was a bunch of restaurants around. And they said there's a hostel that's around the corner from this little park, that they also had some intel that there were some children that were being sold. And so that's where we decided to go. We're there in this park area, and Jeremy and I walk around the corner and we go to this address, this hostel. There's this big bouncer that's sitting out in front. Now, a hostel is one where you go in and, get a room or whatever. But there's a big bouncer out in front. He said, what are you guys looking for? We said, well, we heard there was some people here, some girls here, maybe some boys that we can go talk to upstairs. He goes, yeah, there are. And charged us $10, $5 each for an entry fee into this hostel, quote, quote. And we walk in, he said, go up to room number 8. And so we walk in, we come around up the stairs, and as we walk towards this door, you could hear some laughter going on, some of the girls going on, and we knocked, and a man came to the door, and he walked past us. He was buttoning up his shirt. It was a customer that had been in there with these girls. And we walked in, and there was about 10 girls that were in this room at the time. Most of them looked like they were over 18, probably 18, 19 years old. We couldn't tell at the time if they were being trafficked, if they were being held there. A lot of times when you go into these situations, even the girls that are being held against their will, just like the little girl in Peru, if they don't perform, they get beat up. And part of the performance is smiling and acting like you want to be there, so to speak. In fact, one of our operations years ago, we had some undercover footage from the actual party. And we had somebody that was looking at that footage, and he said, and it just so happened that Elizabeth Smart was in the room with him. She was taken when she was, I think, 11, 12 years old here in Salt Lake. And, she was there and she was watching this footage. And I wasn't there, but this is a story that I heard. And he said, those little 12, 13-year-old, 14-year-old girls, they're smiling. They look like they're happy to be there. Are you sure that you're rescuing them? And the story that I heard was that Elizabeth, who's usually this little sweetheart, just a marshmallow, and she turned into a bear. She said, you listen to me. She said, I was taken. The day that I was taken, she said, I was raped 5 times. She said, the next day, because I put up a fight, she said, they made me go naked the entire day just to demoralize me. She said, the next day, every single day thereafter, I was raped a minimum of 2 or 3 times a day. And in less than 2 weeks after I was taken, we were at a party and I was happy to be there because I was scared. I was scared for my family. I was scared for myself. This is what happens in all of these situations. We walk in, you cannot judge the trauma that these kids are going through by the smile on their face. You can't. They're scared. They're scared for their mother. They're scared for their sister. They're scared for themselves. These traffickers operate using fear, and it happens every time. So we walk into this room, and these girls are in there, and they're smiling and welcoming and saying, "Hey, what do you want here?" And we looked around. We're trying to find out, even though there's a very high chance that these girls were being trafficked. Our goal was to find the children. Our goal was to find the underaged victims that were there, because in that case, there's 100% chance that they're being controlled, they're being manipulated, they're being trafficked. And there was one little girl that she looked like she was maybe 15. And I sat down next to her and on this little couch, and I asked her, I asked her how old she was. And she said 18. She said 18. And then she winked at me, meaning, that's what she's supposed to say from a legal standpoint. But it was obvious that she was younger. And I said, good. It was good to meet you. Now, these girls didn't have cell phones. They didn't have any way to stay in touch with them. So that told us they were likely trafficked as well. And so when we left, I got the contact information of the guy that was running the hostel and the bouncer out in front. I gave him some extra cash and said, "Hey, if we want to set up something separate from here, do I contact you? Can I have you come in and, help us with security?" He goes, "Oh, yeah." And so, of course, that was a way that I could get his contact information and give him a little bit of money right then in exchange for it. So our goal in each one of these situations was to make sure that we had all the information for the federal agents to go in later. So we verified that to the best of our knowledge, yes, there were children that were being sold there, number one. Number two, the other girls that were there were likely being trafficked. They didn't have any phones or any way for them to contact people outside of that place. Number three, it was definitely not a hostel. It was being used as a brothel for these kids. And these other victims that were there. And we had the contact information of the people that were there. So we gave that to them and to the federal agents as part of all the cases that we were helping them build. Then as we're walking around this park area and this pretty seedy, dangerous area of town, this guy came up to us. His name was Damien. He goes, "Oh, Americans. And he was drugged out. And he says, hey, what you doing? Give me 5, whatever else. And he said, "Hey, what can I get for you? I can get you anything. What you want? He says, "Give me a little bit of money. I need something just, for some food and whatever else." I gave him like $2, just something simple. And I says, "Here." And I pulled out a 20 and I showed it to him. I said, "You know the streets, right? You know this area." Now, he's what I call a level 1, right? These are the drug dealers, the druggies, and everything else. And they know the street. They know what's going on there. And if you're a white American that's down there in a dangerous area and you're meeting with guys like this, first of all, that's super dangerous. I would not suggest anybody doing this. But talking to him, we said, "Hey, this is what we're looking for. Who do you know? Who do you know that can provide this?" He goes, "There's lots of people here." I says, "Well, you get me in touch with one of them." And I hold up the $20 bill. I said, I can pay you some extra. He goes, okay, I'm on it. And he actually runs off. Now, I'll tell you this, if every young entrepreneur had the same motivation to build their company as these druggies are to get their next fix, every entrepreneur would be a billionaire. They would. I mean, he was so motivated to go get me in touch with, to bring somebody over to me. So I said, great. I put the 20 back in my pocket as he runs off, and we continued working in that area. Later that evening, I hear some footsteps behind us. Boop, 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 boop. He goes, hey. We turn around, and there he is. He goes, "Hey, I found one of my contacts. I know where she is right now." I said, "She?" He goes, yeah, she's a madam. She's selling a whole bunch of girls that works for her. She sells children to the Chinese. When the Chinese come into town, she sells them the children because that's what they want. And I said, great, I'll give you that $20 to introduce me to her. So he takes us, we follow him through all these back alleys, and we get onto this other side street. And he introduces us to a madam named Paola. Now, I'm changing names just so you know, so people aren't, going where and finding who and whatever. And I never give names of the victims of the children ever. So he introduces us to this madam. And I give him the $20, and she goes, "Oh yeah, I can take care of you, whatever it is you need. I have all the connections you want." Now she's what I call a level 2, right? She is not, from what I could tell at that point, she wasn't holding the children, she wasn't kidnapping the children, she wasn't holding them she was providing them when necessary. And our goal is to find out where she was getting the kids. Over the next few days, in staying in contact with her, we found out that she was getting her children from a tranny, a transvestite that lived in an adjacent city that had a bunch of children. Those were the ones that she was selling to the Chinese when she was there. Now, she didn't speak any English. She spoke a little bit of Chinese and Spanish. So all of those conversations were being translated through Jimmy at the time. After exchanging contact information with her, we told her we'd get back in touch with her within the next few days. Went to bed that night. The next morning, we get in with the federal agents, and they said, okay, we need to go down to this beach city called Esmeralda. Why? Because they had gotten court authorized. They were able to track the cell phones and the locations of the traffickers that had been trafficking the little girl that was in Peru. And we needed to take down the rest of that network. They found out that a couple of the kingpins were not there at the original hostel downtown that we had accessed. So we needed to follow where they were. And they were pinging their phones, and it was in this other area of the country. And this was a few hours away. So we get in the car, and we're driving down there. And on the way there, they said, oh, let's stop. Let's stop it. There's this club. The federal agent said there's a strip club here that we had some other intel telling us that they were selling some children out of the strip club, some underage girls that were working there that either lied about their age just to get a job, which happens sometime, and so the guys that are really going to jail in that situation are the pedos that are in there, especially the Americans. And if we can get video footage of them or any contact information from the owners or even the girls of those guys, then we can go back to the U.S. and we can make sure that those guys get arrested. But we needed to find out if indeed there were underage girls that were working there, if they were being controlled, if they were just lying about their age, what it was. And so they pulled in, and the club hadn't opened yet. It was literally just like noon or 1 in the afternoon. It opened at 2 or whatever. So we pulled into this little dirt parking lot area and went past these guards that were protecting everybody coming in. And we're sitting in this middle courtyard area waiting for the place to open. And our goal was not to go into the club and, loud music. It's difficult to communicate with the traffickers, et cetera, there. But we saw as some of these girls were starting to arrive, and we identified 2 of them that were already there, that looked like they were being held on the property, that they had been sleeping at a room in the back of the club, et cetera. And these 2 girls were very obviously underage, and they looked like they were 14, maybe 15 maximum. And so me and Jimmy went up, and we started having conversations with these girls that were standing out there in front. And immediately the club owner comes over and he goes, "Hey, no talking to these girls. You have to wait until they're in the club, and then you can do what you want to, but you can't talk to them here." We thought, okay, that's suspicious that he's not allowing us to even talk to these girls, but it was obvious that they were young. Now, we needed to find out at that point, were they there as daughters of a worker, or were they working? What was going on? And sure enough, so we waited until the club opened. And sure enough, when the club opened, they came back out of this back room, and they were dressed in mini skirts and tank top type things. And the reasons we believe these girls were being trafficked was number one, the fact that they were living there at the club. They looked like they were being held in a back room. And they didn't have their own home. Number 2, was very obvious that they were underage, likely 14 years old. We didn't have a chance in the conversation before we were taken away by the owner of the club to even ask them, more information about really how old they were, et cetera. But that was obvious that they were underaged. And you could tell by their demeanor. And these girls were very, 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 very shy, very, looking down, didn't want to have a conversation, didn't want eye contact, et cetera. It was obvious that they were being controlled. And so we decided to wait until the club opened just to see if indeed they were working there. And of course, that's what happened. They ended up inside the club in little teeny mini skirts, and it was disgusting to see a child dressed like a prostitute. I've seen it hundreds of times, and it's disheartening in every way. And what makes me really mad, because we couldn't bust the entire thing right there. First of all, it would set things off where the other traffickers that we were following that weren't too far away, according to the pings on their phone, they would know if there was a big bust that just happened, and they would go into hiding. And so, but what made me mad is sitting there in some of the chairs with some of my operators and just watching some of these men came in, and these men picking out some of these different girls, including some of the young ones, and going into one of the little side rooms that were all around. There was a center stage with the poles that were there. That were, the girls would kind of come up and try to dance a little bit. And then all the way around the stage, all the way around, there was door after door after door after door with numbers on them. And the girls that weren't on stage were sitting on a little chair just outside their door waiting for somebody to come. And the other ones would come on stage. It was disgusting. It was disgusting. And then these guys coming out of this room, I call it the walk of shame, right? These guys coming out of one of these rooms and zipping up their pants or putting their shirt back on. What a level of depravity. And what has humanity gotten to, where people are so broken that that's what they decide to go do in their afternoon? It's disgusting, disgusting. So we left after we verified that, yes, indeed, those girls are working there. And of course, so now the federal agents have plenty of cases to follow up on. They've got the case there of that one, verifying that those kids were underage and they were likely being trafficked there. We have the hostel next to the park, where there was some children that were being held that were in there. We have the massage parlor. There was kids that were there that we verified on the menu. And then, of course, the very first hostel that we were at, where the little girl from Peru was being trafficked out of, and we verified that children were still being sold from that place. Very, very successful couple days in verifying all of these things, so the federal agents could go in afterwards and do the stings, pull the kids out, and we could help out with the aftercare. So from there, we continued to follow this ping of where this other trafficker was going, and they were. I guess there's, it tells us between multiple cell towers about an area of about a block where that cell phone is. They didn't have the technology to be able to pinpoint within 2 feet, like a lot of apps are able to do, et cetera. But this court authorized tracking that they had allowed us to continue to follow where this guy was. And we went down into this beach area called Esmeralda. While they were watching where he was, our goal was to make friends with some of the locals that were there, see if we could get them to make a warm introduction to this heavy-duty trafficker. And because if he was in that area, he likely had other level 2 and level 1 people that were working for him, that he was managing their pimping efforts, so to speak. And so our goal was just to get out and make friends with whoever was there and see if we could get a warm introduction to one of the kingpins. And that's exactly what happened. So we got out, and the first guy we met was a guy named Fernando. He was a young kid, probably 22 years old, and he was on the ball. Hey, I can get you guys what you want to drink. You want to know where the good restaurants are? I can get you some drugs. I can get you some girls. I can get you whatever else. And I have a hard time with a 22-year-old that gets wrapped up into this, and I'm like, oh, maybe he knows the right guys, but and he showed me a few pictures, and I'm like, okay, and pictures of what looked like 11 and 12-year-old girls, and he said, here's what I have to offer. Here's what I can get, and I said, great. I said, here's what I want. And I pulled out $100 bill. I said, introduce me to who you're working for. I don't want you just to show me these things and bring them. I said, I need to get in touch with your boss because we're putting together something pretty big here. We need to have access to a lot of boys and girls from different cities around. So you get me in touch with your boss. I'll give you this $100. And he was really pushing back on introducing me to his boss because we had a feeling that his boss was likely the same guy that we were tracking, but we didn't know for sure. And so I said, look, I'll exchange contact information with you. But you get me in touch with your boss, I'll give you the $100. That's the deal. And because I could tell he wasn't the bigwig. I could tell he was working for some people. He was 22 years old, right? He's just a young kid, and getting past him was the number one priority. So we're going around the beach area. We're just pretending like we're tourists there. I've got my big old chain. We've got our sunglasses on with me and Jeremy and the guys, and me, Jimmy, Jeremy, Petter. We got our operators that are there on the beach, we're pretending like we're just beachgoers from the U.S. We got big old chains on and stuff, and just because we're being all flashy so that we can attract the people that are likely working for these bigger pimps. And we have a couple other traffickers that come and meet us, and they said, "Oh yeah, meet us at this restaurant a little bit later." They said, "We can show you the kids that we have available right now. If they're not going to take us to where they're holding them, we can at least get them to bring them to a public place." And at that point, the goal is we had 5 federal agents that were there with us, that were tracking us, that were pretending like they were just kind of beachgoers and whatever else, but they were watching what was going on. So if we could get the traffickers to bring the children to us, that's not as good as us having them take us to where they're holding them, but at least the federal agents can put a tracker on their car or follow them to wherever they're holding the kids. And that's the number one goal. Number one goal is to get these kids out and back to their families. Number 2 is, of course, to take down these trafficking rings so that they don't abuse more children over time. And our goal is to get to the top kingpins in each one of these areas. And so that's what we were doing. So these guys told us, hey, later tonight, why don't you meet us at this restaurant? So we did. After connecting with a few people on the beach, we decided to go to this restaurant, not knowing if these guys were working for the original kingpin that was trafficking the kids into Peru. But either way, they had showed us a bunch of pictures of some children that they had for sale. So eventually we end up at this restaurant. And we're just sitting there. We have 5 federal agents that are sitting in different places around the restaurant or outside, and they do a great job. In some countries, the federal agents suck undercover. They really do. They blow our cover. These guys, we told them, listen, we can't have you next to us ever because that for sure blows it, because having somebody who looks like a cop, smells like a cop, they're right with us, totally kills it. But if they're in different places of the restaurant or kind of in the perimeter somewhere, just to provide that level of protection, that's what we want. We were hanging there in the restaurant. These guys had told us that they would bring these children to us within about a half an hour. And so we ordered some food. We were hanging out there, and there was this bum that came that was really boisterous and very in our face, that was right there at the table with us. And I'm like, oh man, he's creating a lot of extra attention to us that we really don't want. We don't want that attention, especially if they're getting ready to bring a bunch of kids, et cetera. And so one of the traffickers that was still there with us, waiting for the other ones to bring the kids, I motioned him over, and I pulled out a whole wad of cash because I needed him to see that I had the money to be able to pay them to see the kids that they had for sale. So I pulled out all this money, and I pulled out my wallet and made sure he could see all the money that was in there. And I pulled out like a 20 and give him this $20 bill. And I said, hey, can you make it so that we're not being bothered right now by this guy? He goes, oh yeah, So he takes his bum, escorts him outside, and tells him that under no circumstances is he to come back in that restaurant for the rest of the night. And so it created this bond with the trafficker, right? I had already given him some money before he provided access to the kids yet, but it was building that level of trust, similar to what I did in Dominican Republic where the trafficker introduced me to his friend who was a barber, and I let him shave me and whatnot. It's dangerous, yes. Having a 6-inch blade next to my neck that from a guy who's close friends with the major traffickers that we had connected with there. But, in this situation, it was easy. Give him a 20, have him take care of a little problem for us. It was all good. So we're sitting there, half an hour passes, 45 minutes, an hour passes, and they still hadn't showed up. And we're like, we're just sitting here wasting our time waiting for these guys, not knowing if they're real or not. I get a text on my phone from Fernando. He was the 22-year-old that we met earlier that day, that I continued to tell him, listen, I want to meet your boss. I want to meet your boss. And he texted me and he said, hey, I see that you guys are at this restaurant right now. He said, the children that I showed you on my phone are only a couple blocks away from you. You want me to show them to you? I'm like, yeah, we need to find out where they're holding the kids, regardless of the fact that he had already introduced me to his boss via text, but we hadn't met in person yet. And I was waiting for that connection. But if he was going to take us to where the kids were, absolutely. That was a win. And so we decided that me and Jimmy would go, leave the other two guys there to wait for the other traffickers to bring the kids. And we go out in the street, and then we go down. We're following him, and he goes down this alley. This is dark. There's no lights or anything down this alley. And we've got this trafficker in front of us. And, I couldn't tell he was carrying something. I couldn't tell if it was a gun or a knife or whatever else. But he's 22. But still dangerous. He's selling kids, right? And so we're walking down this alley, and it's dark, and our federal agent protectors, I couldn't walk up to him and say, hey, we're going here. I couldn't have any association there. It was interesting though. They saw us stand up, and we could see out of the corner of our eye them kind of switching places so that one of them could come out in front. But with us following him down this alley, now we were out of the sight of the protection of those federal agents, because they couldn't be walking down that alley in the middle of the night with us. That would look weird. And so we're walking down this alley. It's dark, and I hear footsteps behind me. And I turn around, and there's two other traffickers, the two of the ones that were supposed to bring us the other kids. Now, these guys were dangerous guys. We could tell they were dangerous. They were by far more dangerous than this 22-year-old. And I turn around, and these guys are following us down this alley. Now, it's just me and Jimmy. Now, we don't have guns. We don't have knives. It's just us. We've got a trafficker in front. We've got two of them in back of us. This is a dangerous situation. Now, in the undercover work, if we try to maintain ourselves, from a posture standpoint, just barely above the traffickers, controlling the situation, but not being so much where we scare them off, so to speak. If they ever try to trade places with us, if they ever pull a move where we're feeling uncomfortable at all, where they're kind of out posturing us, if they're out posturing us in any way, I don't go here barely above them. I go boom all the way to the top. You have to do that to put them back in the place, because we're in a dangerous situation. I can't turn around and say, what are you guys doing here? You guys okay? What do you want? I can't do that, right? They're literally following us down a dark alley. We're in a precarious position. And so I go from here to here. So what do? I learned this from Joseph, my Krav Maga trainer. He said, if you're ever in a situation where you're feeling uncomfortable, you've got to be bold and in their face. They need to know that you have total control of the situation, undoubtedly, in their mind. And that will diffuse it. We're in this alley. And I've got a trafficker in front of us. I've got two traffickers behind us, and they're not. We're surrounded on both sides. So what do? I took 2 steps forward with my hands up, and I said, "What the f?" Just like that to them, and they jump back. I said, "What are you doing?" They said, "Well, what are you doing?" I said, "What does it matter to you what I'm doing?" I said, "We're following this guy. He's going to show us something." I said, "You have one job to do." And then I pull out a big wad of cash, right? Because what? They're going to jump me for a bunch of cash. I pull out the cash. How's this for in-your-face posture? I pull out this wad of cash. I hold it in front of me, Rich, just like this. I said, "You want this?" I said, "This is yours. It's all yours. But you have to fulfill what you said you could fulfill. It's been an hour. You told me you're going to bring all these children. That was an hour ago. and you haven't. So as of right now, you go back there, you bring the kids like you told me you would, and I'll give you this cash. It's yours. Otherwise, we're done. All right? I'm going to follow him. Went like that, and they left. Okay? Now, that was a dangerous place to be. And if I hadn't leveled that, I don't know. I don't know if we had gotten beat up there, but being that in their face, putting the money out there and say, here, this is all yours, but you have to fulfill. And because I needed to get back before they started coming around, I needed to be back where the federal agents were there. We were in a dangerous place. So then we turn back around. They leave. We follow this other trafficker. And he goes to the end of this alleyway, turns left, goes down this other alleyway. Now we're completely away from the main street. And there's this building. It's cinder block on all levels. It's a 2-level one, cinder block from ground to ceiling. There is no windows on this building, and it's smashed between 2 other ones. And all cinder block. Sticks a key in this steel door, opens the steel door with a key, and we follow him inside. He turns around, sticks a key in the lock, and locks it from the inside. What does that tell us? It tells us, number 1, whoever is inside can't leave unless they have a key. Number 2, there's no windows. There's no way for them to knock and say, hey, here I am in here. Number 3, me and Jimmy are locked in there, not being able to get out without a key. Those are the things that we knew for sure at that moment when he locked us in. He turns around. He said, okay. He said, you guys stay here. I'll be back in a few minutes. And he leaves. We can hear him walking up the stairs, and he goes to this far corner. We could hear some rustling and some stuff going on there. Jimmy turns to me and he said, Paul, one of 2 things is going to happen within the next few minutes. Number 1, we're going to get the shit beat out of us. Or number 2, he has real trafficked children being sold that he's going to come down those stairs with. Fortunately for us, it was number 2. 5 minutes later, he comes downstairs and he has this little girl with him. Looked like she was 11, maybe 12 years old. Again, just like the other kids, got a smile on her face. Why? Because she doesn't want to end up in the hospital like the little girl in Peru. These guys operate using fear with these kids. So she smiles. I said, hey, can I get a picture with her for my boss? I said, my boss will kill me and my whole family if I taste the candy before, he comes down, but we're here just to make sure you have it. He goes, oh yeah. And I says, I'll give you a tip if you just let me, because if we can get her face on a picture that we can turn into the federal agents, then we can make sure, number 1, they can identify where she was taken from, if the parents have reported her missing, even before they go in and do the sting. And of course, now we have the location of where he's holding the kids. And so we get the picture with her, give him a good tip. He sticks a key in the deadbolt of this steel door, opens it. Me and Jimmy get out and we start walking back. I make sure that I take a picture of the map so I can tag the location so the federal agents can go back in later and do the sting and rescue those kids. We got back out to the restaurant, and fortunately, within the next 15 minutes, the guys that were following us in the alleyway performed. They showed up with, I believe there was 5 or 6 children that they brought. One of them was 13. I think a couple were 13, a couple were 14 years old. And we said, yeah, that's what our boss wants. Can we have some pictures with them? Because again, if we can get pictures of the kids, then they can run them against the feds can run them against their database, find out where they were taken from. Meanwhile, we had to keep the traffickers there at least for 15 minutes or so with the kids, so that the feds could go ahead and tag the car that they had brought them in, and or get their guys into position to be able to follow them. So we said they were uncomfortable keeping the kids there very long, because when you're there with a couple Americans and you've got a bunch of young children that are being brought by other locals, it's pretty obvious what's going on. And so they weren't comfortable enough with us to take us to the place they were holding the kids, but at the same time, they also weren't comfortable enough with the whole situation to be in a public place very long with the kids. And so they took him back to the van. That was a success as well. The feds were able to tag it and follow it, and found exactly where they were holding those children so that they could do the sting afterwards. So now we've got in just a few days many locations. We've got the place they were holding the kids they brought to the restaurant. We have the place that the other pimp was holding those children with the cinder block. We've got the location of the strip club that those underage girls were being trafficked out of. We have the location of the spa that they were selling those kids from, and the menu that they showed of all of those kids that were there. We have the location of the hostel that was there by the park that had the kids that were being sold inside that hostel, and the other hostel that the original girl that was being sold out of Peru. So multiple locations that we were able to get in the door with very, very quickly, so they could have a massive sting operation over the next few weeks and put these guys all in prison. We had connected with the guys that were selling kids and identified the fact that, yes, indeed, a couple of them were connected to the same kingpin, the same trafficking ring of the guy that was selling the guys in Peru. I sent the information to the federal police. They did a ping against the phone number that Fernando had sent me of his boss. And sure enough, there was a connection there through the same network. It wasn't the same guy, but he was connected to the other one. When they did a ping on his phone, this entire network was connected. So we go back to the main city, to Quito, and we wanted to follow up with Paola, the lady who was selling children to the Chinese, because we still don't know where she's getting her kids from. And so we needed to have another meeting with her. So we decided to meet her at a restaurant. This was the night before we were flying out to go home. And we're sitting there at this restaurant. We order some food. We're having a great conversation with her. And Jimmy, one of my operators, one of my best friends in the world, he in this middle of this dinner, we're with this trafficker, verified that she's selling children to the Chinese. In the middle of this dinner, Jimmy starts choking, literally, on a piece of chicken. And we go into the bathroom. He can't get it out. He can't swallow it. And Petter, our Green Beret friend that was there, he tries to do the Heimlich on him. But because it wasn't completely blocked, it was, he could breathe a little bit. The Heimlich wasn't moving it at all. And we weren't able to get it out. Fortunately, we had a plane out that night. And right after we were done with her, we exchanged contact information. We already had it, but we were talking about where she was getting her kids from. She verified that indeed she was getting them from this transvestite. We didn't have a location. We knew we needed to follow back up on that later, but we needed to fly out. We had done many successful operations over that period of 4 or 5 days in finding all of these places that were selling kids. And so we get on the plane. Jimmy had to deal with that all the way back to the U.S. He ended up having to go into a doctor and have them be able to get it out. So he was, breathing in difficult breathing all the way back to the U.S. So fast forward a few weeks later, the federal agents are like, look, we really, they did stings on all of the other ones. They rescued a whole bunch of kids, and we needed to go back down and do some follow-up with the aftercare of the kids anyway, and make sure that all of the places they were putting them in were paid for, and they had the healing in place for the kids, and the foods, and the psychiatrists, et cetera, there. But in addition to that, they wanted us to come and follow up with the madam. We needed to find out where she was getting her children. We needed to find out where they were being held, and so that they could go in and do that sting, take her down, rescue those kids as well. Well, there was one weekend that they could do it, that all the federal agents we were working with before, they says, can you be down this weekend? And I looked at my calendar, and we were supposed to go. My wife had a premiere of her movie. Her movie is called it's called La Soga Salvation, and it was being it was in the Toronto Film Festival, and it was her first big U.S. movie. She's an assassin who kills assassins in this movie, a lead female role. She does a great job in it, and it was coming out just that next weekend. So we were like, okay, we have to be in Canada here, but we can be down in Ecuador at this time. And she was going to go and just do the follow-up with all the aftercare. And I was going to take down Jimmy, because I have to have somebody who speaks fluent Spanish, because this madam didn't speak English at all, just Spanish and Chinese. And so Jimmy could not go. He got the piece of chicken out of his throat, but he had some other things that were going on in his life at that point and couldn't make that weekend. And so we're like, crap, I've got to find a good translator. I have to have somebody that I feel comfortable with being undercover with that can translate. Now, my wife, Vanessa, for years, she said, can I go undercover with you? Can I go undercover? And my answer is, listen, until you can beat me in Krav Maga, I'm not taking you undercover. And this is dangerous. These are really dangerous places. These are dangerous people. They're selling us 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old kids. If they knew who we were, we'd have a bullet in our head in a minute, right? I'm not gonna take you to these situations. But I'm thinking through this. She's coming down with me anyway. She's going to be helping out with some of the aftercare. And she speaks fluent English and fluent Spanish. And there's a female trafficker, and she's getting her kids from a transvestite, right? In my mind, I'm thinking, I can handle these guys with my left hand, right? This is not a dangerous situation. Maybe I take her. And so I told her, I said, hey, there's a chance you could go undercover with me and help me find out where she's getting her kids. And she's so excited about it. And I says, and this will be your last chance to do that, because once your movie's out and you get some popularity as an actress, I don't think that's going to be as safe as it is right now. So this is a chance. Let's go. She was so excited. But then I'm thinking, how do I tell the traffickers that I'm bringing a beautiful woman with me undercover? So I'm thinking, I said, how do I tell them? And she tells me, she said, well, just tell them you picked up a whore from Colombia. I said, I'm not calling you a hoe. I'm not going to do that. She goes, I'll tell them. So she takes my burner phone, my undercover phone, and she types to the trafficker. She goes, hey, I was in Colombia and I picked up a hoe, and I keep her with me all the time. She speaks English, Spanish, whatever. So I'm going to bring her with me. Is that okay? Sent that to the madam and to the tranny. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's cool. That's all good. I'm like, okay, good. Okay, we're in the door. So then is what I do is I sent some money in advance to these traffickers, to the madam and the tranny. I said, listen, I only have a day that I can be there, and I have to verify you have what you say you have for my boss. That's the only reason I'm flying in, is just to verify you have the kids. And so I can just make sure it's something that he's looking for. That's all I want. And so here's what I'll do. I'll send him both $500 in advance. And I said, here's $500 to the madam, $500 to the tranny, sending you both $500. So you know I'm serious. I'll give you another $500 each when I get there, if you can provide all the children that you said that you can provide. If I can see them, I'll give you another $500 each. But this is just to make sure that you know that this is important. So both of them accepted it. I sent them the money. What's super cool about doing that, in order for me to send them money on like Western Union or whatever else, they have to send me what they call their cedula, their ID in Latin America. So at this point, and that's how I get ID. A lot of these traffickers, that's how I'm getting their full identification of everything about them that I can send in immediately to the federal police. So they know not just, hey, this lady that's working downtown that's selling kids to the Chinese. No, they know exactly where she lives, everything about her, the tranny as well, who's selling the kids, providing the kids. And so I get their contact information, send them some cash and under my undercover name. And then we get on a plane to fly down there. Once we land, I start texting the tranny. Hey, we're here. When we meeting? Where we meeting? What's the deal? No answer. I call. Boom. No answer. I'm like, what the? I just lost $500 plus a day and a half flying down here and being here. I was pissed. So I'm texting back to the madam. I said, what's going on? She goes, oh, sorry. She got detained. And what do you mean detained? She said, well, she was selling her kids to a customer, and one of the customers beat up one of the kids. And so she got mad because now she can't sell the kid for as much because there's bruises on the kid's face. And so she showed up with guns at this customer's house, and they called the cops. Now she's detained. I said, so what does detain mean? Does that mean she's like in prison for life? What does it mean? She goes, oh no, she knows the cops. It's just formality. They just have to, book her in for a day. She'll be out, in the next day or two. So number one, I'm pissed. I'm pissed that she knows the cops, and the cops know the situation, that she showed up with guns. Why? Because these guys beat up a child that she was selling for sex, right? But In addition to that, I only had a couple days there. We had to be in Toronto for the film festival. We had to be gone for my wife's movie. And I needed to verify she had some kids. And I'm thinking, you know what? I know for a fact that she has other suppliers. She can't just have this supplier being this tranny. She's got other suppliers. No, Paul Hutchinson's pretty nice. Paul Stone's an asshole, right? This is my undercover, right? At this point. And I'm texting her. I said, well, I don't care. I don't care if she's detained. I'm here to verify that you have access to the kids. She goes, well, I can't do anything. I said, well, I sent you $500. I want it back. She goes, I don't have it. I said, not only am I coming to get your $500, I know where you live, all right? I know where you live. I'm coming to get your $500, and I'm coming to get the other $500 that I sent to the tranny. I'm coming to get $1,000. I'll take it out of your ass if I have to. And she's like, oh, no, I said, I'm coming. Don't push. I said, you got access to other kids. Show me some kids. That's why I came down here. And she says, okay. Meet me at this restaurant at 2:00. I said, okay, we'll be there at 2:00. So that's my text back and forth with this lady. And so we show up at this restaurant at 2:00. It's me, my wife, the hoe from Colombia, as we told her, right? And we have a couple of, federal agents that were there. We had, again, 5 federal agents that were either outside in the courtyard or sitting in different places in this hotel, in this restaurant. They had come a little bit earlier just so that they could already have a table, and they were sitting there so they could have eyes on what was going on. And myself and we have a couple operators, and we needed Vanessa there for the Spanish translation stuff. So we show up, and this madam shows up, and she is shaking. She's shaking. She's super scared. Why? Her other supplier for the kids was Cartel, right? And she was nervous being around these guys. And they hadn't showed up yet, but she was nervous, and then we're waiting for them to show up, and she told us who they were. She says, these guys are Cartel. They're super dangerous, but they're bringing at least 9 children for you guys to see. And so we're there, and she gets up, and she says to my wife, she says, hey, come with me into the bathroom. How girls do. Hey, go to the bathroom together. And so I'm a little bit nervous. My wife's going to the bathroom and with this trafficker, and she's in there, and from what my wife says, she gets in there, and immediately she asks her, she says, hey, tell me about these guys. Are they Interpol? Who is he? What's going on here? And she says, just so you know, I'm a sex worker just like you. That's what the madam says to my wife, right? I'm a sex worker just like you. And she said, I don't kidnap the kids. I don't hold them. I just make phone calls when people need them, and I'm just kind of an in-between person there. But I don't control them. I don't kidnap them. None of that. And my wife's like, okay, yeah. She said, yeah, he's not Interpol. He's just, you give him what he wants. You set things up for his boss. You'll get well taken care of. It's all good. I've been with him for a while. I take care of all of his needs for him, whatever. So then the female trafficker, the madam, she takes out a bunch of cocaine. She lays out, she goes, hey, you want some? She's sniffing it there in the bathroom. My wife's like, no, my, Pablo, he'll get mad if I get all effed up right now, and this, and it's too early for me anyway. It's like 2 PM is what she said. And this trafficker's like, oh, this was my breakfast. She's sniffing this stuff up. And then here's what's sad. This trafficker said, hey, are you okay if I call my son right now? It's his birthday today. He's like turning 8. This girl was selling children. She's got children of her own. It's her son's birthday, and she's got this meeting set up with the cartel that's bringing us children. So she FaceTimes her son, who's 8 years old, and they wish him happy birthday in the bathroom. Now, they're gone for like 15 minutes, and I'm like, oh, what's going on? I'm getting kind of worried. So I go to the girls' bathroom. I barge in the door. I said, hey, you guys having a party without me here, And they're like, oh, no. I says, come on back out. These guys are just showing up right now. So they come back outside, and we sit around this table, and Cartel shows up with 9 children and armed security. Now, from what I know, guns were illegal in Ecuador, but not if you're Cartel, right? You can do whatever you want because they're running the show. So imagine this. We've got this table in the middle. We've got us. We've got the Cartel members. We've got 9 victims that are there, a couple other operators. Watching us is armed security from the Cartel that are sitting in other tables in the restaurant. You could see their arm. Their guns were very obvious. They were sitting out. They were sitting in other places in the restaurant, this armed security. And then watching them, who was watching us, was the federal agents who were sitting in different places in the restaurant as well. So this is the scene as we're sitting there. And these traffickers bring this little 13-year-old girl and sit her right next to me and say, hey, if you want, you can go try her out. She's actually still a virgin. We just brought her in. Most of these victims were brought in from Venezuela. Now, what's sad is that many of them came from Venezuela willingly because there's no work there. They're earning like $2 a week, and a dozen eggs cost $1. It's half your income for a week just for some eggs to feed your family, right? I think the eggs were even more than that, more than a week's worth of pay. And so there was no work there, and some of these victims were there by force, but some of them were there because of the poverty. And they were just trying to find whatever way that they could make money. Now, the majority of the money from them being sold was being kept by the cartel, being kept by the traffickers. But some of it could go back or at least keep these girls alive in this situation. So we're sitting there around this table. We exchange contact information with the traffickers. We have a nice dinner or a nice lunch and buy everybody food and French fries and everything else for the girls. Meanwhile, a couple of the federal agents closed out their tab, went out and tagged the car. A couple of them got into some cars so they could follow them. They put a tag on the vehicle that these guys had brought these kids in with. And so as soon as we were all done, boom, we're done. We're out of country. We're getting out because this is super. I'm telling you what, if I knew that Cartel was going to show up, there's no way I would bring my wife. Are you kidding me? This is one of the most dangerous groups of people that we had met with over a period of a couple of years in selling these kids. And so, but fortunately, she handled it like a pro. She's an actress, so she was a great actress undercover in that situation anyway. And we got all the information from them. She even got information talking in Spanish to these girls and finding out how they were brought in there, whether they were being forced, whether they were there by choice, et cetera, et cetera. Either way, they were being trafficked. These traffickers were making big money off of selling these children. And so we call it a day, get back in, go back to our hotel, make sure we're not being followed. These guys follow the traffickers back so they know exactly where the kids are. We got notice that they ended up with 25 years in prison. They did the bust like the day after we left. Boom, these guys all go to prison, 25 years in prison. And so they sent these guys to prison. Identified the homes where these children were taken from. Some of them were brought in. Most of them were brought in from Venezuela. So we put them into a safe house where they were being followed up with and make sure everything was safe. And so it was a huge win all the way around. Right from the beginning, they had done the sting on the original brothel that the little girl that was taken to Peru from. Boom. There was about 6 victims there that were recovered and 4 traffickers, but they represented other rings as well. They were able to follow up with. They were able to take down the massage parlor and take that lady into custody. Fortunately, they were able to find out exactly where she was holding those kids and save them. Then, of course, they took down the hostel that had the 10 girls there that were 18, 20 years old with a few of the children that were there as well. They were able to go in and take down the strip club that had the underage girls that were there. They were being held. They were being held by that strip club. They were able to go in and do the sting on the beach city and those kids that were being held there in the cinder block house. Every one of these things. We turned all the information into the federal police, and they were able to effectively take down all those trafficking networks throughout the country with a handful of times there in the country. I take my hat off to the federal agents that were there, hard work that they've been doing, all of the aftercare of the kids, and to the operators, guys Jimmy and Jeremy and Petter and others that have been down there. And Alex, A-Rod, is a good friend. He was the one who set everything up. He was the one that had the original connections there in Ecuador. A-Rod, if it wasn't for you, all of those kids wouldn't be in a safe place today. So thank you. Thank you for all of your service, everybody, for the good that you're doing, for the world, for your community, for these children. I'm done doing my undercover work. That was actually my last undercover mission that I did there in Ecuador before deciding that it was time to go public and share these stories with you and the rest of the world. We still have a whole bunch of other rescue stories that I'm going to be sharing, but we're going to be doing a lot more when it comes to healing and helping humanity get to a point where this is no longer a problem. Now, I have a book coming out, just so you guys know, within the next couple months. I've got a book. It's part of the Child Liberation series. And the first one will be covering the rescue that the Sound of Freedom movie was made about. A lot of details that are behind the scenes of what happened on that mission, details of exactly how that all went down and the emotions behind every single part of it. You're going to love it. You're going to love that book. And eventually I'm still working on one on listening to your heart and being led in different areas of your life as well to keep you safe, to keep your kids safe, to lead you in a place of health, happiness, and abundance. Thank you. Thank you for joining me on the Liberating Humanity podcast. My name is Paul Hutchinson. I'm grateful for you and taking the time to listen, grateful for the good that you're doing in your world, in your community. Grateful for every one of the operators who have been on these missions with me for their selfless contribution to keeping these children safe and getting them back with their families. So thank you to everybody. If you like this, please go ahead and like this and share it with other people so we can get these messages out and inspire people to do good in their life, to find a charity that they can have a meaningful impact in as well. So thank you. Have a wonderful day.